The local share market has its worst day in 4 years. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese raises the national terrorism threat level to probable, and hybrid car sales in Australia surge as EVs lose market share. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Tuesday, the 6th of August, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
The big story this morning, Sean, the S&P ASX 200 tumbled 3.7% yesterday, its worst one-day sell-off in more than 4 years as rising US recession fears hit global markets.
In the last two sessions, the market is down 5.5%, with yesterday's tumble matching some of the worst sessions during COVID. About $100 billion was wiped off the market yesterday. The banks led the way, with Commonwealth Bank and Macquarie Group tumbling more than 5%, while National Australia Bank, Westpac and ANZ all dropped more than 4%. Interest rate-sensitive stocks were sold off hard. Property giant Goodman Group fell nearly 7%. Tech darling, or at least one time tech darling, WiseTech Global fell nearly 9%. The sell-off follows weak economic data in the US and fears that the economy is heading for recession. The stocks less tied to the economic cycle, healthcare, consumer staples like the big supermarkets, they did the best yesterday, albeit they ended lower. In fact, only 3 companies finished the day in the black yesterday, meaning 197 companies in the top 200 went backwards. Those 3 were ResMed, Domino's Pizza and gold miner Northern Star. Some of the smaller companies got hit hardest, with the share price of more speculative companies such as pharmaceutical groups Neuren and PolyNovo, uranium miners Deep Yellow and Boss Energy, and buy now pay later group Zipco falling sharply. The fears about what's happening in the US is hitting pretty much all markets. The Japanese benchmark index yesterday at one point was down 13%. Incredible. The fears really here are twofold. One is weakness in recent economic data in the US. This is fears that economy will fall into recession, drag the rest of the world with it. The second is that investors are reassessing the big tech stocks on Wall Street and the short-term revenue benefits of artificial intelligence, just how much they're going to hold up. There's nervousness about that, and so we're seeing a sell-off in those tech stocks.
It was such a massive day yesterday, Sean, but how bad is it? Can we actually expect to see more selling now? Is this going to continue?
I mean, I don't know the answer to that. Let's get some perspective on this. The ASX 200 is, as we opened this morning, trading around the same level as it has been for pretty much all of the last 5 months. Now, in mid-April, it was lower. For most of July, last month, it was higher. But even after the sell-off in the past 2 sessions, it's around where it's been for most of this year. Tech stocks have led the falls in the last couple of days. Yet for 2024, the tech index on the ASX 200 is easily the best performer. It's up around 20%. That's in front of the financials index. So the financials were sold off in the last couple of days, but the financials index is up more than 10% for 2024. What I'm trying to say is this isn't a GFC. It's not a global financial crisis. It's not a 1987 collapse. Well, not yet anyway. At the moment, it's a sell-off. It's not even a correction, which means the market in Australia is off 10%, let alone a collapse. The consensus view among economists is that the Australian economy is not heading for a recession. It isn't even clear that the US economy is heading for a recession. Certainly, investors are falling out of love with the tech sector, but investors are a very, very fickle bunch. I just think it's not time to panic.
All right. Well, that's the share market. What about other local financial markets, Sean?
Oh, go on. You say it. You want me to talk about bond markets,
Bond markets. Yes. Tell me about bonds, please. I was trying to be subtle and just kind of lead you gently to it.
They're part of the excitement, Michael. They certainly are. Yields on Australian government bonds are tumbling. So what does that mean? Bonds are safe places to park your money. Big investors like the super funds are buying up bonds because they're safe. That pushes up their prices. When the price goes up, the return you get, when you're paying more, the return you get, or the yield, goes down. That's why we say bond yields are falling when investors are rushing into bonds. Sounds counterintuitive? It's not. Anyway, 3-year bond yields are down 25 basis points to just over 3.4%. What that points to is that investors believe that over the next 3 years, the benchmark rate, which is currently 4.35%, will average about 3.4%, i.e. interest rates will fall. That's over the 3 years. That's what they expect interest rates to be over the 3 years, on average, 100 basis points below what they are today.
Sean, is now a good time to mention the Ask Fear and Greed that we have coming up today? Ask Fear and Greed is obviously it's a bonus episode. It comes out twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And today, you're actually answering a question that is very relevant, very pertinent, I would say. And the question has come from Haley, and it is all about kind of markets pricing in a certain chance of rate cuts.
Yeah.
And it's asking you to explain how that all works, which I think is a fantastic question for you to answer.
Yeah. So Haley asks, how can you say there's a 20%, bond markets are pricing in a 20% chance of a rate cut? And it's actually really challenging to explain, shall I say.
I'm looking forward to the explanation. It comes out at midday is when the Ask Fear and Greed bonus episodes. And if you've got a question of your own that you would like Sean to tackle, then please send it on through via the website, fearandgreed.com.au, or any of our social media platforms. Sean, we've talked about bonds. What about commodities? What about cryptocurrencies?
Cryptos, that's a good one. Cryptos sank. Bitcoin tumbled 10% yesterday. Now, cryptos don't do so well in uncertain times. Hence, Bitcoin yesterday fell to around $54,000 a unit. For the last week, the token lost 13%. It's the opposite case when it comes to gold, which investors buy in uncertain times. It's trading around $24.50 a unit. Now, to be honest, it was actually higher than that, and it did get caught in some of the selling gold, though it still remains not far off record levels. Onto oil. A recession in the US, which is the world's top consumer of oil, would lower demand for Brent. And in futures trading, a barrel fell to under $74 a barrel. That's over the weekend. That was the lowest since the beginning of the year. But there's something else at play in oil markets. The crisis in the Middle East isn't getting any better. And fears of further military action is working to push oil prices higher. So there are two powerful countervailing forces in the oil market. Finally, the Aussie dollar. Well, it's certainly been caught up in the rush to safe assets. It's now fetching just around 64 US cents. That's back to around the lows of late last year.
Sean, you have a terrific interview coming up after the show today. A very, very timely interview. You're speaking with Roger Montgomery, Chief Investment Officer at Montgomery Investment Management.
Yes, I start by saying, Roger, what the hell is going on out there? We discuss what's gone on in the last two sessions and why it's going on. And Roger's always very plain spoken. He has one prime reason for it, which is kind of interesting, that he's very focused on what's going on in tech stocks in the US. And that's kind of what we talk about. And then I say, so what's going to happen in the next few days? And there's this like moment of silence. And Roger's like, well, I really wish I knew. But then he gives me a very good then he explains what he thinks is going to happen.
It is a great chat. It is well worth a listen. It is coming up after the show. Sean, we've still got plenty to get through. It has been a massive 24 hours, so we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, ASIO, the country's top spy agency, has raised the national terrorism threat level to probable for the first time since 2022.
The growth of radical political and religious ideologies and 8 recent alleged terrorist incidents in Australia triggered the shift, though there is no imminent attack expected. Previously, it was raised to this level back in 2014, alongside the rise of Islamic State. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese yesterday said there had been a global rise in politically motivated violence and extremists, and governments around the world are concerned about youth radicalisation, online radicalisation, and the rise of new mixed ideologies. ASIO Chief Mike Burgess said Australia's security environment has become more volatile and unpredictable, and people are being radicalised more quickly and are more willing to use violence to advance their cause.
Sean, the Reserve Bank Board meets today, and while pretty much everyone thinks there'll be no shift in interest rates, there'll be an awful lot of attention on what the board has to say about inflation and really about how well the economy is travelling.
The moves in financial markets in recent days, along with last week's slightly lower than expected underlying inflation figures here in Australia, certainly culled any thought of a rate rise at the meeting. In all likelihood, the bank will say that the next move in interest rates could be either way, will be data dependent. We've heard that a fair bit. But I wouldn't be surprised if Governor Michelle Bullock sounds just a little bit more open to a rate cut in her press conference after the board meeting.
But there's no chance of a rate cut actually happening today?
No. Having said that, Ross Gittins has been writing about economics for The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald for more than 40 years. There was a period when people read Ross just to get an insight into what was about to happen at a Reserve Bank board meeting. He had a remarkable record of getting it right. Yesterday, he wrote a piece based on an Australian Council of Social Services briefing note that said if the central bank is serious about maintaining full employment, it needs to start cutting official interest rates ASAP. He didn't say they were going to, just inferred that they should. Just worth noting.
Oh, watch this space. Oh, that's quite tantalising, isn't it?
It is. I mean, I don't think they'll cut rates. In fact, no one thinks they're going to cut rates. But Ross Gittins has this phenomenal record. He's not even saying that they're going to cut rates. He's just saying they probably should cut rates.
Oh, wow. Anyway, we will have all of that news this afternoon in the afternoon report, and then a full report and an interview tomorrow morning on the daily episode. Sean, Woodside Energy's $30 billion Browse development north of Broome is at risk after the Western Australian Environmental Protection Agency rejected the project.
The decision is preliminary and Woodside will continue to negotiate for approval. Woodside's developing Browse with BP, PetroChina and Japan's Mitsui and Mitsubishi, and production had been expected to start in 2026. The EPA is concerned about threats to pygmy blue whales and green turtle nesting sites, and also the risks of oil spills near the Scott Reef, according to a report on WA Today. Most of the considerable environmental activism against the Browse project has so far focused on the significant carbon emissions expected, but that's not what the EPA came out about. It isn't just a potential blow for Woodside, but also for the federal government, which is trying to shore up gas supplies for the next decade or so. Western Australian Premier Roger Cook came out yesterday. He said he expects Woodside and the state EPA to work together on the matter. So it's not a done deal yet. It certainly hasn't. You can't say it's not going to be able to go ahead, but there's more work to be done.
The pygmy blue whale, Sean.
Yes. I thought I was going to get through this without being picked up. Tell me about the pygmy blue whale.
Did you know that the pygmy blue whale still reaches lengths of up to 24 metres? So it feels like a bit of a misnomer.
Yes.
When you think of a pygmy blue whale, don't you think of like a little foot-long whale just kind of...
Yeah, you would think so. Something in the fish tank.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas this is 24 metres long.
So how big is the traditional blue whale? Do we know that?
Yes. The traditional blue whale can reach a maximum length of just a touch under 30 metres.
That's really impressive.
So the pygmy is not that much shorter than the full size thing.
No. I've been Googling while you've been talking. The blue whale, up to 199 tonnes.
That's a hefty whale. Oh, Sean, it's the perfect opportunity to mention my favourite video of all time. Do you remember
I do remember because I've seen it with you so many times.
Oh, I send it out every kind of anniversary of this happening. And it's about kind of 50 years ago in the US, where a whale carcass washed up on a beach and they weren't quite sure what to do with it, kind of tow it back out to sea or bury it. It was too big, so they decided to blow it up, of course. But they got the amount of, they were using kind of TNT or something to do it, and they got it wrong, the amount they needed, and used like 10 times the amount. It's just whale everywhere.
The camera, the whole lot.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe we should include that video in the Fear and Greed weekly newsletter when it goes out tomorrow.
What an excellent idea.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with business news, but we will include it. Head along to fearandgreed.com.au and sign up for the newsletter. It comes out every Wednesday morning, and this week's will feature the whale video. Anyway, Sean, on with the business news. Sales of hybrid vehicles last month were nearly 90% higher than a year earlier, whereas sales of full battery EVs are losing market share.
While hybrid vehicles are up 88.4%, plug-in hybrids jumped 129% compared to a year earlier. The Toyota RAV4 is now the number one selling vehicle in Australia, and most of the RAV4 units are hybrids. The RAV4 is now taken over from the two big selling utes, Ford Ranger and Toyota Hilux. They've always been the top selling vehicles in Australia. Suddenly RAV4 hit that top spot. The data suggests that Tesla sales so far in 2024 are sharply lower than last year. Now, I say suggest because Tesla and Polestar, the other EV maker, had a dispute with the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries. They now report sales via the Electric Vehicle Council, and then it's extrapolated for these figures. Excluding Tesla and Polestar, the total number of units sold last year was just under 99,600.
Ramsay Healthcare, the nation's largest operator of private hospitals, yesterday warned of a drop in profit for the last financial year due to underperforming European and UK businesses.
Some of the poorer performance reflected one-off items and impairments, but the group said the underlying result had been driven by improving activity trends and labour productivity. Ramsay reports its official half-year earnings on 30th of August. The share price ended down 0.3% yesterday, which, given what everyone else did, was a pretty good result.
Seems like it. Now, TPG Telecom is once again in talks with Vocus over its fibre network 9 months after a proposal to sell the network for $6.3 billion fell over.
In a statement, TPG said shareholders should be aware that the 2023 discussions didn't lead to a transaction, which I think we knew, and there's no certainty one will eventuate from current discussions. Vocus has around 27,000 kilometres of fibre network, mostly in metropolitan areas.
All right, turning to international news now, and Israel is braced for a possible attack from Iran and regional militias in retaliation for assassinations of Hezbollah and Hamas officials, as the US sent defensive reinforcements while pressing for a Gaza ceasefire deal.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said at the start of a cabinet meeting that Israel is in a multi-front war against Iran's axis of evil. He said that Israel is striking every one of its arms with great force. And he went on to say, we are prepared for any scenario, both offensively and defensively. The US, which is moving a fighter jet squadron to the region and keeping an aircraft carrier nearby to help Israel, is also pressing Mr. Netanyahu to redouble negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza to prevent the nearly 10-month-long war from escalating. According to Bloomberg, the group of 7 foreign ministers expressed concerns about the risk of a wider regional crisis during a video call over the weekend.
US Vice President Kamala Harris is set to announce her running mate for the November presidential poll over the next 24 hours, with a representative from a battleground state likely to get the nod.
Ms. Harris met with at least 3 possible running mates: Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. According to media reports, the meetings were part of Harris's final stretch before selecting who will join her on that 2024 presidential ticket. Harris's entrance to the race has overhauled the whole dynamics of the presidential campaign. She's now raised more than $300 million. She's also cut into the lead that former President Donald Trump held in national polls. Her vice presidential pick is critical because it certainly could determine whether the momentum continues to propel her or simmers as election day approaches, particularly in those battleground states.
All right, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview, a very important one, must listen today. Roger Montgomery, Chief Investment Officer at Montgomery Investment Management.
Roger knows much more than I do about equity markets and what's going on, and that's all the discussions about what the hell is going on out there at the moment.
Indeed, it is up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, which is also where you sign up for the free weekly newsletter featuring the whale video. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Tuesday, the 6th of August, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.